Fyna, Blade of Aravia, is the new champion that I guess has been out for a couple weeks, right? But is a new faction lord champion for the High Elves. Extremely good champion, really cool kit. A little bit difficult to make work because the High Elves is not particularly a great faction these days. It's kind of been left behind a little bit with new and interesting champions coming to them. However, I was really intrigued by her kit, and I figured there's got to be a way, there's got to be a really good way to be able to utilize her in a clan boss team. And so that's what I've been tinkering around with a little bit. And I was able to come up with a Bateater team utilizing her that lowers the speeds incredibly and can make it so you only need one man-eater to make it work. We're calling it FynaEats, and it's a pretty cool team. Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video talking about this FynaEats clan boss team. Now, it's nothing crazy new. If you guys have, played around, you understand how this all works. But for those of you that aren't as familiar with the Bateater team, it's probably the top clan boss team in the game. I mean, it maybe doesn't do the most damage possible, but it's the easiest team to run in this game. It will one key any affinity. It is affinity friendly, and it works on all difficulties in the game. So it's incredibly useful, and a lot of high-end players, once they built this team, have never looked back at it because you don't necessarily need to. But for a lot of people, one of the hard parts with that team is you only have one man-eater. You don't have two of them. Well, if you're lucky enough to pull Fyna, Blade of Aravia, you now only need the one man-eater, because I was able to build a team utilizing her unique abilities to make it so it is the same one key, all affinities. You actually have the opportunity to bring in a second DPS now. And on top of that, the speeds are actually a little bit slower. So it's a pretty darn cool comp, I would say. And I'm really excited to be able to kind of show this to you guys. There's a few interesting quirks with Fyna and her abilities that make this a little unique to build. So I want to go over all that. Obviously, we'll look at the champs as we get into the run here. But this is a really fun team that does some pretty incredible damage overall. So let's look at the team build, and I'll kind of walk you through a little bit of how this works. So if any of this explanation goes a little bit over your head, I do have this build, this team on the website. The champion isn't quite in the calculator at the time of recording this video. It might be by the time you see it. So I don't have a link to the calculator to show you exactly how this works with everything involved. But suffice to say, it is very similar to the Bateater. The speeds are almost identical. The biggest change, that was the whole point. I do have this team on the website, right? The team build is on the website. So I have all the instructions, everything broken down in writing, if that helps you guys out. But how this works, so the real unique thing between this and the Bateater team, other than needing less particular champions, is of course that man-eater usually one of your fastest champions, one of your man-eaters, is going about 268 speed, which is actually pretty darn high. With this team, you can actually build them considerably lower due to Fyna's passive ability. Her passive gives you extra turn meter when you get buffs on your champion. So because of that, we're actually going to be able to lower the speeds considerably on him, all the way down to 250 speed. That's the lowest we're going to be able to go with this. Everything else does need to follow the Bateater specifications. That means that our DPS champion, our slowest champion in this team, has to be at least 218 speed, like you see I have here with Bellinor. Everybody else is going to have to be at least 245, like you see here with Whisper. I have a 248, Fyna 248. You need to maintain the minimum Bateater speeds in order for this to work, right? Seeker needs to be 248, 249. I think can be a little bit faster, but you kind of got to keep in mind, the faster you make Seeker, you might need to look at tweaking the speeds of Bellinor to accommodate that. I don't think that's really going to be an issue for you guys, but it's really that 248, 249, 250 speed for Seeker is what you want. And then the fastest champion, your man-eater, just has to be faster than Seeker. So just has to be a little bit faster than your Seeker in this comp. And because what's happening is Fyna, I think breaking down her kit will help a lot with this, right? So she has this passive that whenever a buff is placed on an ally, it fills her turn meter by 3%. Fyna places a lot of buffs, right? First off, we're getting some buffs that are universal, right? We're getting universal buffs from Seeker. He gives you increased attack, right? Even his passive can activate, it gives you increased defense. None of those are actually going to affect the team. Even a champion like Bellinor, he has AoE, increased crit rate for everybody. That's not really going to affect the team either. What might affect the team, however, are the buffs that Fyna places. And this is why we're able to run Bateater so much slower. Not only does she have this A3, which gives you 3 awesome buffs, right? Increase attack, crit rate, and crit damage. We can build everybody at a lower crit rate because of this, right? Not only does she have those 3 buffs, but she also has the second ability here, which is going to place 3 buffs, block debuffs, block damage, and counterattack on a target ally for 2 turns. Now, that's only on one champion, and that champion is going to be Maneater. That's why we can actually build him slower, is basically he's going to be getting an extra 9% turn meter boost. And that's the difference between that 250 speed and the 268 speed minimums that we had before. So we can build them faster than 250, but I would just generally recommend staying about as slow as you want to here. And I wouldn't try to go too much faster than you would have normally on a Bateater squad. Part of the uniqueness of this is how we set up Fyna here to work. I think one of the things I should do here is show you how it's set up in the calculator with a typical Bateater team, right? And I just won't have Fyna. We'll have a substitute champion in there for you so you guys can see kind of how it's supposed to work. Okay, so this is the typical Bateater setup, right? It doesn't, the champions aren't particularly matter, but the speeds are generally the same, right? Or Batman Forever kind of similar thing. You can see I have all the champions: Maneater, Seeker, Bellinor. I have Feargun Isabel. I figure that's a pretty good replication for Fyna, right? You can actually type in that name here and make it a little easier to understand exactly what's happening here, okay? So basically how we want to do this is when Fyna has an ally on her team, she gets an extra turn when she uses her A3 ability, the one that places all the AoE buffs. It's going to give everybody that 9% turn meter boost because everybody's getting 3 buffs. But it's also going to fill the turn meter, but she's going to get an extra turn if she has one other high elf champion on her team, which you need in this. Now, I'm using Bellinor. I think he's best in slot, but there are definitely some alternatives. I will talk about all the ones I would recommend at the very end. There's actually quite a few champions that you could utilize in this slot, I think, to good effect. The great part is that by having 2 DPS, you don't have to bring everything with just one of them. You could really mix it up a little bit and have some fun with it. So that's what we got. We got Fyna here. She's going to be doing her refresh ability. And every time she uses that A2, she's going to place that on the leader in the comp. In this case, Maneater. Assuming all things are equal. Most importantly, assuming that everybody has unkillable on themselves. Now, one of the best advantages of these Batman and Batman Forever and Bateater teams is that the lead champion, your slowest champion, your DPS champion, can usually run relentless gear and take turn after turn after turn. Because we're not putting speed buffs on anybody, it's just turn meter boosting. Taking extra turns doesn't hurt the speed tune. Well, unfortunately with this, we can't use relentless on the fastest champion. And the reason why is when we put that refresh ability on Maneater, everybody either has to have unkillable or can't have unkillable on. And because we need Maneater to be going last in the comp, I've tried this a bunch of different ways. The only way to do this is to ensure that everybody has unkillable when she places that buff. Now we're able to do that and actually use a champion like Whisper in this comp, who I have in relentless gear. But the key is Whisper's taking her turn after Fyna places those buffs. So before Whisper goes and does her 15 turns in a row, which is super fun to watch, we're refreshing the skills of Maneater so he can place unkillable on us as much as he wants. Now, in order to make this work, though, one of the things we actually have to do is we actually have to prioritize Maneater's A2 ability. It's a little tricky, but you'll see once I get into it. But you can see here, I'll close this up and you can see the speed tune a little bit better. We'll zoom in a bit. But we're going to open up with Maneater's A3, right? Keep us unkillable. And then like I said, we're going to get that refresh ability from Fyna. We have to open with that for her as well. That's going to reset all of Maneater's skills. Remember, everybody has unkillable on. So in that case, it's going to go highest in the turn order, or highest in the build order, I should say. And that's going to be our leader, which is Maneater. Maneater gets a refresh. Now we're prioritizing his A2, so that is actually the next skill he uses, even though all the skills are off cooldown. We'll go through all of our turns. Fyna's going to take her extra turn right here after Seeker does. Doesn't hurt us, again, because it's just turn meter boosting. Extra turns aren't going to hurt us. And then very last, Maneater's going to be able to use his A3, keep us affinity friendly. And then the pattern resets. Because he places that unkillable on us the last of his turn, everybody has unkillable on themselves at the top of the next turn. And so when Fyna places the refresh, the counterattack, the block damage buff, it's going to go back on Maneater because everybody's unkillable at that point. And so she's like, doesn't matter. We'll go to the lead champion. And that's how it's going to work. And she'll again put out all her buffs. That's going to give us a big turn meter boost. That's how we can run Maneater slow. You'll see I do have him at 268 speed right now just to show this to you in the calculator. But in actuality, because of the buffs we're getting with Fyna, he can run as slow as 250 because of the extra turn meter boost he's getting from that. So it's pretty, I think, pretty awesome. He actually gets, turn meter boost from Seeker as well. And you run him fairly slow, surprisingly. And so then as we go through, it's going to be the same thing over and over and over. And you'll notice after the refresh, that's when Whisper goes. So she takes turn after turn after turn with Relentless. It doesn't hurt us at all. The only that is the only spot that can be in Relentless, though. Can't be Fyna, because we need to time her skills. Can't be Seeker, we need to time his skills. Can't be Maneater, again, need to time those skills out. And it can't be Bateater, because we have to keep unkillable on ourselves before this refresh happens. Now, one of the things you might be noticing that, hey, why isn't Maneater using his A3 down there all the time? Well, obviously, setting this up sometimes can be a little bit trickier. More importantly, I need to make sure both of these are on 2-turn cooldowns, as that's how that would normally work. They'd both be refreshed. And when you can see it, so when it's on a 2-turn cooldown, A2 happens, then A3 happens, keeping us unkillable for the full fight. You can see when the refresh lands, everybody on the team has unkillable on themselves, which again, pretty crucial. So that's how it works, pretty simply. Okay, hopefully that explanation didn't go over anybody's head. I tried to make it as simple as possible, but again, it is on the website, so go check that out, deadwoodjedi.com. You'll see this build on there. I will have it linked in the description of this video, and I have, most of the instructions written down here. There's some, obviously, in time, we learn more about these comps. If we find that there's exceptions, other champions you can use, limits on some of the speed ranges. We don't have all the upper limits for that Maneater. I don't have all, the full limits for everybody fully tested yet. But I do know that these basic numbers will work for you. So you can see Fyna here gets that extra turn. Again, you need one faction ally to get that extra turn. That is the crucial piece of this. You have to have that. Does not work if you don't have that. So just remember that. That's going to be really, really important. And I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's jump in the run, see how it goes. And while that's going on, I'll show you the champions, and then we'll go ahead and look at we'll talk about, alternate champions you can use at the end of it. Oh, by the way, yes, as far as setup goes, we open A3 here with Maneater, but prioritize Siphon. Fyna, A1, A2 is prioritized, A3 is second. Seeker, we're gonna have to have a 1-turn delay before you use the A2. Bateater, open, you can really use whatever skills. It's just a DPS champion. Same thing with Whisper. Figure out what skills you want to use and use them to your heart's desire. The great part is with Fyna, we get that crit rate boost, so we're going an extra 15% crit rate. We can build everybody with a lot lower as we go through it. But let's fight. Let's jump in here and see what we can't do. So like I said, it is full auto. I don't have to touch anything once we have it set up. You can see there goes that bust from Fyna right on Maneater, fully resetting his skills. Because we get that extra turn from Fyna, that means her skills are basically on a 2-turn cooldown. This is why this can work. This is why you also have to have at least one faction ally in this team. And like I said, I'm using Bateater. I think he's awesome for this, really ideal. But obviously there's options. Now, the great part about Maneater is, of course, he makes you unkillable, as well as gives you block debuffs, which makes this affinity friendly. That's the ideal. In theory, this should be able to work with any block damage or unkillable champion, right? You want to use a Rosh card the tower there. If you wanted to use a Warcaster in that role, you should be able to do that at the same speeds you're running Maneater. The difficulty comes when you run into affinity, right? Because not affinity friendly. Also, you have to worry about the stun landing on somebody. If it doesn't hit one of your DPS, you're in trouble because it needs to hit. If it hits Maneater, if it hits Seeker, if it hits Fyna, those could all be problematic. To be fair, it probably wouldn't matter if it stunned your lead champion. Like if you're using a Warcaster, stunned Warcaster, you're still getting the skills reset. So the stun's actually not as big of an issue with that. But you do have to deal with affinity debuffs, specifically against Spirit Affinity when the slow debuffs happen, right? And you definitely don't want Fyna getting stunned, and you definitely don't want Seeker getting stunned. So when you're facing red affinity, because they're both blue champions, that could be problematic as well. So those are the only two things you'd have to navigate. Otherwise, same speeds, same setup will work even without a Maneater. You know, if you can block debuffs, exactly the same. Cleanser might be a little bit trickier, but should work fairly similarly. My guess though is your Maneater, or I should say your Warcaster in that scenario, would probably have to be a little bit faster. So that would be the only thing I'd be a little bit cautious of when doing that. But yeah, this works out really nicely. Great thing is if you do use somebody else in that lead, like a Warcaster or a Tower, and you actually want them to get stunned, the counterattack, the block damage, both of those fall off. So he's not a negative stun target in that case. He's still somebody that you can target. So by the time that the boss takes his turn, that's not an issue. But you can see we're doing really good damage, right? Over 2 million damage a turn. We should be putting up even better numbers by the end of this. And I absolutely love Whisper for this role. I think this is like an exceptional spot. You can fully utilize your A3 because you're going to be getting extra turns. You get that, you know, the decreased defense and weaken from Bateater, so you utilize that because the weaken's up. Her A2 is really going to slap, and then she always has a chance for extra turns on her A1. So you can, I've seen her take 4, 5, 6 turns in a row doing this comp, and that is a lot of damage and really kind of fun to watch. So definitely there's some options here with that, but you know, that can be anybody. That could be your Draco if you have one of those. It could be your Rhodas if you wanted to use that. You know, there's lots of options here. You could even, you know, if you don't like Bateater, one of the options you could always do is actually bring in, oh, what's her name? Oh, there's a champ. Gosh, now I cannot remember for the life of me, but she brings HP burn in this faction. She's like one of the only champions that does this. What is her name? Oh gosh, this is gonna kill me. This is gonna kill me. Oh, I can't remember for the life of me. Single target HP burn. Who is it? Elenarl. You can bring in Elenarl and potentially pair her with Rathalos, and that could be a really fun way to build that, right? Rathalos brings decreased defense anyway. Now you're getting the HP burn off Elenarl's A1. That could be a really nice ability. Plus Elenarl brings poisons as well, so she brings a lot of kind of, passive DPS damage in that kind of a team. You're just giving up weaken, you're giving up consistent decreased defense, but that's not a bad way to go about doing it either. But you can see this runs full auto. We're already 3 times the damage per turn pretty much. So it is just going to ramp up and do really nuts damage by the end of this. But let's take a moment. Let's look at the champions, how I had them built, and then we'll jump to the end and see what kind of damage we put out. All right, so let's take a look at the champions and how I've built them. We've got Maneater here. Like I said, I have them at the slowest speed possible that I've found, 250 speed. Everybody you're going to see, most of them are going to be around 70% crit rate. It's what works for this build, which is awesome. And I basically built them out for as much damage as I can, including Maneater, though he is in a toxic set, just add a little bit extra damage. Probably could add one more champion in that, as we don't really fill up the debuff bar most of the time. We also have Fyna here. Again, trying to build as much damage as I can on her. 248 speed. We need her slower than Seeker, but faster than our Whisper. I found 248 works really well. Haven't really tested lower, though my understanding is anything between 245 and 248 should work as long as it's slower than Seeker. Over 245 speed should work well for us. But again, that 70% crit rate is a nice part of the build there. We've got Seeker here, 249 speed. This is generally what I like to build my Seeker at. I believe 248 works. I believe you can go faster than that. I know you can. But obviously I think 249 is kind of the sweet spot for that, just as far as a build, making it easy to do. Obviously I did max out Seeker's crit rate because of the double turn Seeker takes. Not always going to have that increased crit rate buff on. Is it necessary? Probably not. You're probably fine going at 70% crit rate, but you really want to maximize your damage. Hit it to 100. This would be my idea there. Then we have Bateater here, 218 speed, slowest we can go. We can definitely go faster than that. I've done it, I think, with 224, but 218 is a pretty nice number. Again, low on the crit rate, big crit damage, accuracy to land the debuffs is important, and plenty of attack on that build. And then Whisper, of course, in Relentless, she is the star of the show. 248 speed. You'll notice that you might not notice right now, but she is last in the turn order. Basically, her and Fyna have the exact same speed. When you have the same speed of champions, turn order matters in order, like when you put them in your team. So Man-Eater's our lead. He's the first in the team. Fyna's the next champion I put in the team. So she'd be second placement. And basically, as long as Whisper's in a placement after Fyna, she'll go after Fyna if they have the exact same speeds. And so that's how this is able to work. Obviously, I try to build her with as much damage and attack as I possibly could. Don't really need the accuracy with Bellinor on the squad, but having a little bit of it doesn't hurt. We can still land our weakened debuff as well. So that's the builds. $154 million damage. Not too shabby, I would say. Yeah, this team is pretty darn good. I mean, to give you an example, when I run a Bateater, even if I built it on here with these champs in my best gear, I wouldn't come close to this kind of numbers. I mean, I just wouldn't be able to put that kind of numbers up. Fyna adds a lot to your squad. I mean, the increased attack you're already getting from Seeker, but now you're getting increased crit rate, you're getting increased crit damage, and you're getting that on all your champions for the full fight. It's pretty wild, on top of being able to bring in a second DPS champion, which I think is pretty remarkable as well. So yeah, this is a really fun team. I think it's really, really effective. And obviously there's a ton of variations you could put into it. So this is by far not the only way to go about building it, but I think it is really, really effective as an approach. Obviously there are plenty of other champions that you can bring in. If you don't have a Bellinor, you can use basically any DPS in place of Whisper. The fact that you can use 2 DPS just works really, really nicely. So let's talk about some of the other champions that you could use. So you have Fyna, you don't have a Bellinor, you're looking, what are the other options here? Well, actually, there's a bunch of high elf options that I think would be very viable for you. And I do have them actually listed in the advanced notes of this tune on the website. So 100%, if you're interested in looking at this, looking at alternatives, go check that out. Again, it's linked in the description of this video. But what are some champions that we could use? I want to point out 1 or 2 right off the top that I think are really interesting. I don't know that they're best in slot, but I think they would be really interesting options. One of them, the legendary Royal Huntsman, right? This guy has an AoE decreased defense, which is very needed, and also has an ignore defense skill here that hits really hard. So this is a very hard-hitting champion anyway, but being able to bring decreased defense and that big strike could be really, really helpful for you. Alexander, this is somebody a lot of us have as one of the login champions from a while back, AoE decreased defense as well. That could be really helpful. And then of course he can hit decently hard with the rest of his skills. So that might be a budget option for some of you folks out there. I had mentioned Elenaro with the HP burn that she brings, the poisons that she brings. Don't use the explosion, please. It's not effective against clan boss. But the other one I wanted to point out that I think would be really interesting, and again, there's I have a dozen options on there for you, but is Marksman. Because not only does he have poisons on his A1, but a chance for an extra turn. And then on top of that, I would turn off his A2. You don't need the turn meter fill, but he does have a 4-hitter with ignore defense on it. That could be really fruitful for you. So he's got some interesting stuff that I would love to try out. I've never been able to use Marksman for Clan Boss because of that extra turn, but I think that's the one spot that actually makes it viable. So apologies for the red dots being on the test server. That's kind of how it goes down. But I thought this was a really fun tune. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities if you're lucky enough to get Fyna on your account. Obviously, not everybody has her, right? She's a pretty, one out of however many champions we have in this game. But if you have her, this really does open up some possibilities, not just for Clan Boss, but for Hydra as well. I have built a team with her for Hydra. I'm planning on showcasing that too. I don't know if it's God tier or anything like that, but it was very fun to build and I think opens up some other interesting possibilities. That ability to reset your skills is really, really strong. And I think could be, I don't know. I think it's a pretty cool ability to have. So there's some fun stuff that we can do with that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this wasn't too long and you guys enjoyed yourselves. Another just fun Clan Boss team out there with the new champion, Fyna, the Blade of Ravia. Very cool champion. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Till next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.